Hey friends, today's episode is with a man named G.S. Youngblood. He's a coach and a men's work leader who teaches guys about the art of masculine leadership in relationship and in their own lives. He wrote this book that I'm holding in my hand called The Masculine in Relationship, a blueprint for inspiring the trust, lust, and devotion of a strong woman. He joins me on the show to talk about his journey in relationship, the ups, the downs, the struggles, the failures, the breakdowns, and the breakthroughs that brought him to doing his own work in relationship and his own life, bringing structure to his own life so that he could bring more of a structure to his relationship. We talk about what he calls the masculine blueprint, which he shares about in his book. And it's a structure that men can use to guide their growth in relationship, learning how to be better in relationship. We talk about some of the work that guys have to do outside of relationship to be better in relationship. And we talk about some of the work that men can do in relationship and using their partner and the stuff that comes up with them. I'm always talking about this on the show, using the stuff that comes up in your relationship as an opportunity for your personal growth and your personal evolution. Because it seems cosmically designed that your romantic partner is meant to bring up your most difficult stuff. So we have a short but really good conversation about the type of work that GS does with his clients and some of the workshops and trainings that he does for men. And I'm just a big fan of this work, about men's work in general. I'm going to have a lot more people on my show in the future talking about men's work because it just never gets old for me. And it's part of my own evolution to meet guys like GS and learn from them. I learned little tidbits from him throughout this episode and really appreciate the work he's doing. So without further ado, folks, enjoy this episode with GS Youngblood. All right, I am sitting here with a man named G.S. Youngblood. We're going to talk about men's work. We're going to talk about relationships and the work that you do with men. Thank you for coming on the show, Mr. Youngblood. I'm excited to chat with you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Looking forward to this.
So I think maybe a good place to start would be, you've been working with men for at least 15 years. You're a coach, you're a men's work leader. I would imagine you run group experiences as well as one-on-one stuff, and you've been immersed in men's work for a number of years. And in your book, The Masculine in Relationship, which I'm holding here, you talk about some of the work that most commonly men need to do in order to get right in relationship with a feminine partner. And I'm curious about all the men's work leaders that I know and trust have had a lot of their own challenges, have been through a lot of their own peaks and valleys that brought them to be a teacher. I think guys who haven't really done their own work, when they try to teach, it doesn't work, right? Guys don't fully trust them. So I would love to hear about some of the peaks and valleys that led you to this place where men see you as a trustable leader.
Yeah. Well, I love what you said. You've got to crash and burn sometimes to actually learn something. And, we've all heard the quote or some version of it that you don't learn a lot from success. You learn a lot from failure. And, my situation was no exception to that. 15 years ago, I had a marriage that ended and ended spectacularly in a ball of flames. And in a way that was particularly painful for me. Became a very dark time in my life. And, by the end of that relationship, I had allowed myself to become so emasculated, and I was just kind of dancing around to stay out of trouble to make things better. And at that time, little did I know that was actually part of the problem. That was actually making things worse because I didn't have my own identity. I didn't have a sense of who I was, what my preferences, needs, and boundaries were. I wasn't in touch with my emotions or my insecurities. I wasn't a very good relationship partner. And when that relationship ended painfully, that was my fuel. Failure was my fuel to find a better way. And I knew there had to be a better way. And I was fortunate enough to be given David Deda's book, the way of the superior man. Like, this is usually how most guys enter into this field. Um,
Common.
and it woke me up to something I did not understand and was not aware of at all, was that masculine feminine polarity dynamic. Um, and so, going on to study with David for a while, going on to study with some of his students over the last, 15 years, I've been on a journey to find a better way. And at some point in that journey, that journey for me had two tracks. One was studying with some of the names in the field that you would recognize, but also being in a relationship for the last 12 years with a very both strong masculine and strong feminine in the woman I've been with for the last 10, 11 years. And so I was getting the learning through the studying with teachers, but I was also living it every day and practicing what opened the relationship, or what created more connection and openness in the relationship, and what kinked it up, what shut it down. And so I have a very expressive woman. And so was able to see that in real time. And, you fail, you succeed, and you learn over time these, what I think people would refer to as these relational skills. And so for me, that led to the book. I had tons of notes I was taking on dynamics that I was observing, and then suddenly realized I had enough and coalesced that into the book. And the book is intended as a framework for men to be grounded within themselves, but at the same time more relational with a feminine partner. And some of the men's work out there doesn't necessarily touch on the relational aspect. So I emphasize that a lot because I'm talking almost strictly to men in relationship. And so that's what a lot of the work is about, being more grounded and powerful within yourself and more relational with your feminine partner. And so, like I said at the beginning, what's fueled me is just that failure. And it's like, no, I'm not going to live like that anymore. I'm never going to feel like that again, because that's no way to live. And that's led me to where I am today.
Thank you for that overview. And there's lots of bits and pieces in there that, I can just feel the wisdom in that, and we could sort of open those pieces up. First of all, I just want to commend you on writing a book in the first place. My wife wrote a book and then wrote a journal to go with the book. And I have a few other friends who have done so, and it is not easy to fill something up like this and fill it with value, and and to go through the editing process, which I know is like half of the process. You edit it so many times, and there's just so much involved with writing a book. So first of all, I just commend you on that, that piece of work.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me that you describe your current relationship as with a woman who's like has a very strong masculine and has a very strong feminine, and would love to hear your thoughts on what that's like, because some men are with very feminine partners, and I think my partner actually has a similar dynamic going on, and we're both what we call fire beings, and we're basically two bulls sometimes when we're having a dispute, and it can get pretty fiery, fire on fire. Yep. So I would love to hear like your experience of what it's been like to be with a woman who really has a good relationship to her masculine, and what works for you in interacting with her and dancing with that energy. And then perhaps we can get deeper into some of the other pieces you touched on.
Yeah. She got a strong masculine from her father, who was a very dominant person in his life, and she can get shit done. She can plan our vacations. She can make decisions about what we do or where we go if I let her. And if I abdicate all that, she can take care of all that. The problem is that gets old. And she doesn't want to have to do that all the time. And in fact, that reminds me of something my ex-wife said to me at the same time. She was also a strong woman. She's like, I can do all this shit. I can care for the house and the kids and kind of plan our life, but I don't want to have to. And so, so my woman has that capacity. She's not helpless without me.
Hmm.
And I think that's the challenge, because it could be easy for guys to lull themselves into complacency and say, well, she can do this, she got this, it's no problem. And what a lot of guys don't realize is that it gets tiring when they have to stay in that masculine energy. And it really diminishes attraction in a certain way, not absolutely, but in a certain way, it really can negatively impact attraction. So my woman can do all this stuff. She just doesn't want to have to do that. And that's where if I want the relationship to fully thrive, then I've got to be in my directive energy, which is sort of how I refer to it, and bring leadership, bring logistical leadership, bring leadership into our emotional life, bring leadership into our sexual life together. Those are the things that I choose to bring to the relationship, because I know that it brings her more into her surrendered feminine state, and which is something that she also has. She can be flowy and playful and mischievous and bright and expressive and all those things that I love, nurturing, all those things. And when she's not that way, I think early in our relationship, when I was very much on the early side of my growth path, I would get, I would be upset and resentful when she wasn't in that energy. And it was along the way that I realized that I could evoke that energy out of her anytime I wanted. I just need to step into my masculine. Um, and so she has all that expressiveness. She also has the flip side of like radiance and fun, and the sparkle that she has is the fire she has when she gets upset.
Hmm.
You know this, and I'm sure your woman has similar qualities. Like
Yeah.
when somebody is, the flip side of bright and expressive and fun is that they can get really pissed, and it can
Mhm.
come out, really sharp or toxic and very messy, very confusing. They're bringing up things from 5 years ago. They're bringing in other topics, and you don't know what the hell to do.
Yeah.
So, for me, it was that was part of the laboratory of being with her, of where I was experimenting with what actually worked, what actually created more connection. And that's what's in the book, is like how to really handle the wild feminine at times, the strong feminine. Um, and so I think that's my reflection back to you of my woman's strong masculine and her strong feminine. And I think over time I've definitely learned to be with both, and am more skillful these days at being able to evoke her into a state that I would like her to be in, rather than sort of be confused as to why she's acting the way she is.
Yeah. And to be able to evoke that despite the bumps, the challenges, the negativity, the complaining, the um,
Yeah.
expression of like, oh, I don't like it this way, or I don't like that you did that, the criticism. I think, we're in an interesting time where women have become more self-sufficient. Women have learned to nurture their masculine side more and be self-sufficient in the world, create their own structures, like they can get shit done.
Yeah.
And a lot of women don't want to live in that place for their whole lives, especially in their relationships. They
Yeah.
want to live in that place. And then you have men who have become more sensitive over time as the generations have gone on, and we are less and less traumatized, I would say, by, like the shit my grandparents went through,
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
and what they passed down to my parents. And the world has become, at least over here where I'm living, more and more safe. And now my generation is like, we're all into therapy and doing our inner work. We're all going to workshops, and trauma is a hot topic, and somatics are a hot topic.
Yeah.
Men have become more sensitive. We've become more in touch with our hearts, and we've become more accommodating um, to women in general. Whereas my grandpa's generation was like, whoosh, get in line, like
Yep.
this is the role for women.
Yep.
Um, so we've got more sensitive men, and we've got women who are, more in their masculine, and and but they want to be in their feminine. And you've got men getting their feelings hurt by their women.
Yeah.
And, a common thing that I have struggled with over time is like, how do I lead her when I do, it doesn't necessarily go well. There's a complaint, or I choose the place to go for a meal, and I actually choose based on what I think is the best for both of us, considering our needs and considering the options in the area. And then she's complaining about the food.
Yeah.
There's kind of these like moments that get lodged in a guy's memory about like, well, whenever I choose to lead, like, here's what happens.
Yep.
the disappointment.
Yep.
And for sensitive guys, that stuff sticks,
Yep.
you know? So how does a man nurture his capacity to lead in relationship,
Yeah.
despite the challenges that are
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
brought to him?
Yeah. I think you're talking about like what do you do when you encounter some resistance to leadership? And you so hit it on the head that some guys are like, well, I tried to lead and she didn't want, so fuck it.
Yeah.
And that's a bad way to go. I have somebody who's in my probably secondary circle of family, and like he got married later in life to this woman who's in the family, and he did that around sexuality, and kind of seems like he got shot down a few times. They literally didn't have sex for 20 years
Right.
because he was so butthurt at what he perceived as rejection. And so I like to say, like, you don't have to be the guy that makes the decision. You do need to be the person that makes sure a decision gets made. And sometimes you'll be making that decision. Other times you can be more inclusive, you can defer to her, but you're framing that, hey, a decision needs to get made here. So, guys, don't get caught up in some archetype you think is what you need to be, in terms of like, oh, you have to make all decisions and she just needs to follow. I think that's where guys get in trouble and get into the hurt realm when they take on too much responsibility. Just make sure a decision gets made. And one of the things I talk about a lot when I'm talking about leadership is attunement. And I think this is an area that guys could definitely improve upon, present company included. Know your woman. If you want to lead, you need to know your woman. You need to learn about her over time, her preferences, her boundaries, her needs, and know what she likes. No, and then it's also not just over time, but it's in the moment too. What's her state right now? This is no more important than in sexuality. Like you might think that she's ready to go, but maybe sexuality kind of starts to get going, but then there's a resistance in her. And it could be that she's just got something on her mind, or there's a pot on the stove, or she forgot to do the laundry. But if you're not sensing that in the moment, then you're also not being attuned to her. So I think guys, the more you can get attuned to her over time and in the moment, the more your leadership will land in a way that she's like, okay, I'll follow you. I'll get on your ride with that. So attunement is such a big piece of leadership. And so I think those are the two things that come up for me when I think about resistance to leadership.
Yeah, that's fantastic what you're saying about attunement. I feel like my partner is virtually always attuned to me based on her nature.
Yes.
But I have to work to attune to her because I'm like, swirling in my own world here. And yeah, and so I've had to learn how to like calm myself and get into a certain space where I can like, tune into her and listen to her, because all of the times that I don't and that we bypass her feelings are the times that like trust is broken.
Absolutely.
When I'm focused on an agenda, getting somewhere with her, getting something done with her, even if that's sex, like, okay, like we're married and we have a kid now. And so there's like date nights and we have short windows of time. And if I'm focused on sex, but there's something in the way and I just want to blast through it, it doesn't work. And it causes further rupture in the relationship. And we're better off sitting and talking and getting on the same level than jumping past it to sex. And I have to be attuned enough to sort of sense that in the moment.
Yeah. Oh, Ben, that's such a great point, where we have an agenda for the moment. Like we kind of have a vision of what it's supposed to be, and then we fixate on that agenda. And fixation is a very male trait. Not exclusively, but in general, it's a very male trait. We want to attack problems, and it's really good for us to have that level of fixation because we do get shit done. And in the relational space, it really hurts us because our blinders go on to what's actually unfolding in the moment. And you're right. You said it's better for you to sit and talk, and I would describe that more generically as it's good to have, instead of fixation, just open into more spaciousness and kind of witness the moment unfolding and see what's happening, rather than going for the agenda. Again, at work, agenda is good, fixation is good. In relationship, bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a doer and a thinker primarily in the way that I operate in the world. And I love this. I love my schedule. I love my task lists. I
Oh
got
yeah,
all that structure set up in my life. And most of the time I'm just like going on that frequency. And I come whipping into the house like that. And I'm in,
yeah,
I'm multitasking in the kitchen, and there's emotional things happening in my house that I'm just like, I can sort of sense it in the background, but I'm like, nah, my
yeah.
focus here.
Okay.
And so I'm like very much a doer and a thinker. And like you said, my partner's good at getting shit done,
Yeah,
but she's very much a feeler. And so the most nourishing thing for our relationship has been switching from doer and thinker mode into
yeah,
feeler mode with her. And I
yeah.
think that's really difficult for men. Um, and some of the things that I've found that have been the most helpful for that, first of all, have been men's work as
Hmm.
like an adjunct to relationship work,
Hmm.
and then direct relationship work, like you're
Hmm.
talking, where
Yeah.
you had a failed marriage, that breakdown caused a breakthrough for you. You started really digging into this stuff, and then you got into relationship, and you've been working on like so much of your whole repertoire here. Your book was built through the learning that occurred in relationship. And
Hmm.
I think that's an important theme that comes up in the show a lot, is like, hey, you can meditate on a mountain, you can go to a darkness retreat, you can go do ayahuasca in the jungle and like do all of your inner work infinitely, but get into relationship and see, like,
Yeah.
that's your real tester.
Oh yeah.
That's going to bring up all your shit that you haven't worked on yet, and it's it is the real sort of battlefield, for lack of a better term,
Yeah.
to see, like, how are your skills actually going to pan out.
Yeah, it's so true. It's like you can be the dude on the mountain and you're going to be fighting with your woman 5 minutes after you get home. So I love that you pointed that out. Yeah, for me, this is a lot about awareness training. We got to take our awareness as men. We don't want to lose our capacity to be able to do that, but we want to be able to shift it off and open our awareness to the wider space and sense into, uh-oh, as you said, there's an emotional current here. And then train our awareness so that we can actually start to feel
Mm,
and what's going on. And so I do a lot of that work in my live workshops and also in my online boot camp. We practice feeling. First, we practice feeling our physicality, and then we map that over into feeling our emotionality. And we do that through embodiment work. And I'm such a big believer that men's work has got to include a daily embodiment practice. That was what I wrote my whole second book on, was embodiment. Just because it's such an important topic. And I mean, we could talk about that for a while, but embodiment is so important to go from feeling the physical and then feeling your emotional body. And that's just, it just takes training. Guys, we're not naturally good at it. That's fine. But we can train ourselves. And it doesn't require us to adopt a feminine style of being with our emotions or expressing them. There's actually a masculine style of
mhm,
feeling, experiencing, and sharing your emotions. And that's what I work with a lot of my clients on.
mhm. This is a great topic. I love this topic of embodiment because I think guys are still waking up and learning about this word. And at the same time, a lot of guys are already doing some of the stuff
Hmm.
that we might talk about here. But I think there's like a rising tide of embodiment work. I had Amir Khaligi on about a year ago, and
Yeah.
I love some of the stuff that he's doing. I'm sure you've bumped into him. Um, and I think like 20 years ago, men were just starting to do yoga. It's kind of like the by my memory, it was like, oh, okay, it became normal over that, in the 2000s, like men started going to yoga and being like, yeah, okay, men can do yoga, like
Mhm. Yeah.
there's a way for men to do yoga, and it became more normal, and so most of the men now that I know are like, yeah, like I know yoga. I went through a period where I did lots, and now I have my own practice, and so in terms of embodiment and that next layer for men, and like really trying to do some practices to feel into themselves, what kind of stuff do you use for embodiment? What are some of your favorite tools for embodiment?
Yeah, it's I'll answer that by comparing something in meditation to something in embodiment. And in meditation, as we all know, we sit and we notice the thoughts arise in our mind, and then we make a choice to sort of disidentify with those thoughts. We don't latch onto them. We just kind of let them float on by our awareness and then out. And one of the problems that I think a lot of people have with meditation, I certainly did the first 10 years I tried to meditate, starting back in the 90s. Um, it's a little incestuous because it's the mind watching the mind and then trying to get the mind to stop operating and
Yeah.
thinking. And so it's like, wait a minute, this feels like the fox guarding the hen house. Um, with embodiment, what you're doing is, instead of trying to like not, it's like, don't think about a pink elephant. It's like, don't think your thoughts. Although that's actually hard to do because it's more of a negative. With embodiment, you actually take that, your awareness, and just turn it towards some physical sensation in your body, some chosen, not just random, but some chosen one. So the most obvious one is just feel your weight on the chair that you're sitting in. And so with meditation, you'd sit, you'd notice thoughts, you'd let them go. Cool. Hard to do. Most guys don't stick with it. With embodiment, you sit and then you drop your awareness down to your, in this case, my butt, because I'm sitting in a chair. And I can just I feel that kind of that sense of weight, like compression. Gravity pulling me down, chair pushing back up, and there's that sense of compression. And I could feel that. That's a sensation. So what I would say is, an embodiment-oriented meditation exercise would look like: sit, close your eyes, and then turn half of your awareness to this sensation of weight, and just feel that. Just feel that. And then I'll sit here for a while, and thoughts will start to arise. But instead of trying to not think those thoughts, what I make the choice is just turn your awareness back to the sensation. Just make that choice. It's a very deliberate choice. And then you'll drift, choose to bring it back. You'll drift, choose to bring it back. And because sensation is more tangible than the negative of don't think, and identify with thoughts, I find it much more accessible, and I'm able to stick with it much longer than I would if I was just kind of standard meditating. Um, so I think that's an example of how the principles of embodiment can be brought to bear on even something as simple as sitting in meditation.
Yeah. 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 What comes to mind for me is the rising breathwork movement.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's a meditation and it's an embodiment practice. It's something to focus on.
Mm-hmm.
As a thinker and a doer, it's easier for me to do something that takes me out of thought than it is for me to sit and
Mm-hmm.
try to let go of thought and doing while doing nothing.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Like
no.
the doing is a portal through and out. And this is, I think, probably, just to sort of zoom out on my own life, it's probably also one of the reasons why I do these ceremonies, where I have to drop everything in my life
Mm-hmm.
to go do them. And then those things vaporize my ego. and then I have to just like be in that liminal space between everything. Like I did something to get myself there, because if I didn't, I would just be chugging along all day, all weekend,
Yeah.
getting chores done around my house and just like feeding that dopamine train of get shit done.
Yep.
And so on the smaller level, stopping and taking 40 breaths in a row and then breathing out and holding that, and then taking a breath in, that is just like a simple Wim Hof practice.
Yeah.
Brings me back down into my body, and all of a sudden my heart feels more open. I feel more attuned and aware of what's happening in the room. And I've had a state change. Yeah. And Qigong also really helpful. Just this sort of focused movement that isn't necessarily like exercise, but is, I love the thing in Qigong where you're like literally slapping your body to be like, hey, wake up. I find men respond really, really well to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and as I hear you talk, here's what comes up for me about, you were talking about, like, you really got to pull yourself out of the day-to-day flow and really go deep. like, here's what comes up for me. It's not necessarily
Mhm.
advice for you per
Mhm.
se. How do you weave your practice into the fabric of daily life? That's what, and so that's part of what I do with guys and teaching them how do you weave it in with the fabric of daily life so it doesn't become that thing over there and then daily life is here.
Yeah.
And I also one of the things I'm really adamant about in the practices that I do with the guys is having to add in a relational component. We do a lot of we're doing some of these practices, but we're doing it with a partner where there's eye contact because now you pull in there's a relational dynamic, there's an other. And
Mhm.
now can I be grounded and feel my own physicality while I'm with other, which is we already talked about is different than if you have your eyes closed or you're on the mountain. So that's a big part of the style of what I'm sharing with guys is I add a relational layer almost all the time in all the
Mhm.
exercises that we do.
Mhm. Can you stay in your body and feel while with a partner?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and the retreats, men's work retreats have been really great for me to contact those sides of myself and to do
Mhm.
it with other men, which somehow just feels a lot safer for me. There's this like ease when I'm in a room full of men that is not so much there when I'm in a room full of women or a mixed room or a room with one woman. There's just something about that. The
That
real
brings it up.
challenge is to bring that and to be in that sitting in front of my partner.
Yeah.
So is what we're talking about within the masculine blueprint, which I know is a big part of your work.
Yeah, this is, I mean, what we're talking about now with embodiment fits into the first element of the blueprint. So maybe I'll just tell you all three elements, and
Mm-hmm.
then if you want, we can just talk about each three individually. There's three elements, and I'll say this first. When I created the blueprint, I created a thing because I wanted it to be really memorable for guys, very simple to understand and very actionable. So those are some goals that I had in creating it. I also wanted it to be relevant in the modern world. I'm not trying to roll it back to the 1950s. We're in a Me Too world, and so it's got to work in a Me Too world to be relevant, in my opinion. So that was also a goal in designing this. First element is respond versus react, and so this is the quality of a man that's grounded and his nervous system is very settled, and from that settled place, moment to moment, he can choose how he moves through life, and what he says, how he gestures, how he responds to people, how he physically moves through space. These are all, they just feel chosen when you're in this man's presence, and so that's what we're after. There's that quality of groundedness and stillness and choicefulness. So that's respond
Mm-hmm.
versus react.
Mm-hmm.
Second element is provide structure. So this starts with clarity within oneself, about clarity about what you need and want and prefer and what your boundaries are, but also about the other people that are involved. Like if we're talking about you and your partner, like you're attuned to her enough to know what matters to her and what her boundaries, needs, and preferences are. And so as you develop this clarity about what the moment calls for, it also folds in other people as well. And then that inner clarity gets expressed as outer direction in terms of deciding what you do or deciding how you're going to do it. And so, if it was how, and let's say you guys are having a fight and you can see it's just starting to spin down the drain and it's going nowhere. If you're really providing structure, what you might do is pause. You have the wisdom to know that this is not going anywhere. You pause and say, you know what, baby, I can see us, we're just kind of beating our heads against the wall. Let's take a 15-minute break and just come back. So you're not dictating her of like end of story. You're not telling her what to do. You're kind of providing structure about how you'll fight. And that's just one example of ways that you can
Mm-hmm.
provide structure. Um, and so all of that inner clarity gets expressed as outer direction and structure and clarity. And I think that's a man really exhibiting this trait is bringing more clarity to the world, whatever that means in an individual situation. Third element is create safety. And so we're talking about physical, financial, and emotional safety. And I don't talk a ton about physical and financial in this book. I'll do that in a future book. but I do talk about emotional safety a lot. And, how do you create emotional safety in your woman? And I think any woman would tell you that they're really the biggest determinant of how open they are to you is what level of safety do they feel relative to you and in your presence. And a lot of that is about making space for her emotional expression, even when it's a little bit messy, making space, empathy, things like that. All the things that make her feel emotionally safe around you are a big deal. And that's the third element of the blueprint. So the blueprint is those three elements.
Okay, thank you for outlining that, and that makes a lot of sense. What you put together here makes a lot of sense to me. This piece about respond versus react is really like conscious versus unconscious, and I don't think we realize how unconscious we are when we're 20 years old for the most part. When I look back at who I was in my 20s, and when I meet people, dude, when I meet people who knew me in my early 20s and they haven't seen me for 10 or 15 years, they're like, "What did you do, man? You're like a
You're
different
different.
person."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's good.
Yeah.
Did they notice?
Yeah. Yeah. We are the journey from unconscious living and patterning to conscious is a long one, and
Mhm.
but it's possible, and it creates a quantum shift in how you show up in the world. And the tricky thing is, it's hard to know what things we're doing unconsciously versus consciously,
Mhm.
and it takes on a just to sum it up, it takes a lot of self-searching and digging and self-examination and
Yeah.
humility
Yeah.
and going to workshops and things that challenge you, going to places where uh, there's stuff being expressed that triggers you, so that you can then look at the trigger and see what's underneath that and see, how maybe you've that's a shadow element. All this stuff. You have to kind of like go to those places, and slowly you kind of like wake up through all of that work,
Yeah.
so that you can then choose your action. That
Yeah.
that to me is the process of becoming conscious or getting conscious in relationship, is by
Yeah.
like going into the difficulty and wading through it, and then some being able to come out the other side, which is why being in relationship is such a crucible for waking up.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would add to that, although I think you were implying this in what you were saying, was just and receiving the reflections that people give you, and
Yeah.
particularly your woman, because
Yeah.
she's seeing shit that you don't want to hear. Yeah, you're good. You're nodding. So
100%.
yeah, I would definitely have the humility and the inner strength and the self-esteem to be able to take in even the negative reflections
Yeah.
of how you might be impacting her.
I used to think when my partner brought me a complaint or a criticism, I thought she was attacking my character and
Hmm.
telling me that I wasn't good enough. That's like the
Exactly.
extent to which I understood what was occurring.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I
It's
started hearing guys like you saying like, "Oh no, this is information for you. Like this is actually
yeah.
something for you to look at in terms
Yeah.
of how you're showing up.
Yeah.
There's stuff you don't see."
Yeah, totally. That's the problem, is disappointment is like kryptonite for men. If we sense our woman's disappointed, which may or may not be true, but if we perceive that, it's really hard for us because of what you said. It's because we want to be competent. It sucks if we don't feel like we're competent and that they respect us and our way of being. So yeah, it's so true. And it's all part of growing up and waking up.
Mm-hmm. This piece also around providing structure resonates big time with me internally and externally. And the way I understood it, how you were describing it, was like, okay, step one, provide structure for yourself in your own life. Provide an internal structure,
Hmm.
like take care of your own home, your own office. Jordan Peterson says like, hey, young fellas, start with your room. Like, make your bed and clean up your room. Create a schedule for your day. What do you want to do with your life? Like, start working on those things piece by piece. And I think at a basic level, that's like the beginning of what men's work is about. It's like, hey, what do you want to do? Okay, what are you doing to get there? Like,
Hmm.
like this week, what are you going to commit to us that you're going to do
Hmm.
before next week to move that forward. And then we hold that guy accountable. Like, create a structure in your life that makes you a trustable person.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
that will raise your self-esteem because you'll actually trust yourself more.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, for sure. As men, we like action, not just expression. Now, we do have to have that capacity for just expression, but we have to have forward movement and results in our life to feel good about ourselves as guys. I think that's what you're saying. I totally
Mhm.
agree with you.
And in terms of providing structure, I also noted that you shared, provide structure internally and externally. And I love the external piece as well, in your relationship, knowing your partner's needs, considering them, and setting boundaries within the relationship, and even boundaries that protect your home or the types of people you want in your life or what have you. And, a common one that a friend shared with me recently about, how they do conflict was, okay, if either one of us starts to raise their voice, we call a timeout on
Yeah.
this and we come back to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. It's like the how we're going to do things, the how we'll fight, and setting structure like little rules like that is a great example.
And, to you and me, that's normal. That's common knowledge now. But to
Mhm.
the me in my 20s, I was very sort of easily swayed and pushed around by what was happening in my relationship at that
Mhm.
time. I didn't know that like I needed to bring structure to all of the things, the ways we communicate, the ways we fight, and all of it, and just like really be an active participant because I always leaned on my partner as the more emotionally intelligent one.
Yeah.
And so
Yep.
I just deferred all of those decisions to them. And my partner didn't want to do that. Just going back to the beginning of the show, right? Like my partner has almost always been the more emotional one, but
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily want to be setting all the structures for how we relate emotionally.
Yep. Yeah. Emotional leadership is a foreign concept for most guys, but is so powerful. It makes you really uniquely attractive for your woman. She's with a guy that can once in a while take the lead on the emotional dynamic between the two of you. It's so rare, but treasured by most feminine beings.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, this is something that men in general need to go and do intentional work on because it's not something that is taught to us early on. And
Yep.
we get really focused on creating abundance in the world, thriving in our work and in our bodies,
Yep.
working out, but in the emotional realm, there's a lot of atrophy that occurs for guys. So they have to go to these specific containers to work on that. And so I won't even get into creating safety because there's a lot there. But just in the interest of time, how can guys work with you? In what capacity do you work? How can people find you and
Yeah.
learn more about? You've just given us like a tiny tip of the iceberg here
Yeah.
of who you
Yeah.
are and what you do.
Yeah, I would say for guys, the easiest way, go to Amazon and get the book. So if you haven't picked it up yet, it's the best way to get introduced to my work. If you want to know about the other offerings, go to my website, gsyoungblood.com. And what you'll see there are a few things. One is my online video course, which is the art of relational masculinity. If you like to go through things on your own and at your own pace, that's a great option. The thing I'm most excited about these days is the boot camp. And it's online, but it's live with me
Mm,
for 8 to 10 weeks. I take a cohort of 10 to 12 guys through a process of 8 weeks. And you're really going to take the principles of the blueprint, like you and I have been talking about, Ben, and we're going to go deep in practices. And so there's also that community element too, because you're doing it with other men.
yeah.
And that's the thing these days that I'm most excited about. And then in October in San Francisco, I'm doing a leading in the bedroom workshop where we're going to really teach a lot of groundedness and sexual leadership and how you can bring more what I would refer to as dark energy into the bedroom.
Hmm.
So those are kind of the big things that I have going on these days.
That's great. I love that you're running a live program with men. I feel like 5 years ago, everybody had a video course. I have a video course, and like it's good for guys to be able to go in and get teachings from you directly. But There's so many of those out there, and you can only go so far in a video course. I was with a guy this weekend who was like, yeah, the first contact I had with you was your video course, and there's like 27 videos in there, and pretty much every single video you're telling me to join a men's group. So I joined a men's group.
Yeah, exactly.
Because in that space, you want to tell people like, hey, no, get into a live space with other men. And there's only so much that you can do on Zoom, but there's a lot that you can do on Zoom.
Yep.
And I work mostly on Zoom. I have a course where I take guys through relationship teachings over 12 weeks, and we're doing live coaching. We're challenging each other. We're holding each other accountable. We're bringing our shit to the table, and we watch guys really make a big change through this video screen over 12 weeks. So guys, listen to this. If you're inspired by Mr. Youngblood's work, I definitely encourage you to check out his live program, because these things I have found, all of the ones that I have invested in over time, they're so worth it. They're so worth it, especially this live cohort stuff where you really kind of get to know the people and the teacher along the way. Like there's a special bond that occurs, and you feel it if you ever meet up with these people in person later. There's like an electricity to that first meeting because you've actually really built something, and it just sort of bang coalesces when you finally give
Yeah.
that first hug. So yeah, thanks for running a live boot
Yeah.
camp. Appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, Mr.
Mm.
Youngblood, thank you. Thank you for coming on and just giving me like a little intro. It's nice to meet you and have a
Yeah.
conversation. I love meeting other men who are in this space. And thank you for being an inspiring leader in this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's my pleasure to be on it. It's always fun for me to talk with guys who are so deep in the work as well. So thanks for having me on.